though there are fluctuations, I mean, for example, in this particular example, you can see that there is no significant change. It stays pretty much. So you normally should have something like that. And actually, you can scroll down because I remember you actually put. And what's interesting is you can of course draw comparison with what is in the. Is it in the Sedgwick paper? This one? Yeah. Well, it's taken from Devaney and Lee, but I suppose they have reprinted it. But so that's you know, that gives you some elements of comparison if you want to discuss the matter. Normally at this stage, it's also the time where you would have begun to investigate which mergers and acquisitions have taken place, and that normally should give you an opportunity to discuss concentration ratios in relation with merger and acquisition. Did you do something about that? I remember you mentioned something about merger and acquisition and concentration ratio. Well, why don't you start from the start? I mean, what you want to show. You don't have to show everything, and just tell us what you've done, and you know, give some idea. So here, the top graph is what's it? Is it the market share?
Yeah, the composition of the market share after the acquisition of the mergers.
Mm-hmm. So after the acquisition,
yeah.
So did you do it before and after?
No.
Just after. But so basically you assume you grouped the data from the very start. So even if the merger didn't happen, it happened only 5 years down the line, you grouped.
No, I mean all the mergers and acquisitions are already included. So,
but because I don't quite remember, when did it take place, the merger and acquisition? During the period 2000, 2008 or before?
Just during the 2008.
So basically you group some together, but for example it might be the case that in 2000, 2001 they were not together.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the reason why I ask that, it might not be the case with cinemas, but very often when you have a merger and acquisition, instead of having the final market share being the market share of A and the market share of B merged together, then
no, I mean if they were merged in 2000, 2001, then it's just like two separate companies.
Okay. No, but what I meant is that it doesn't bring, I mean, it's fine the way you did it, but I may be interested to compare that.
Yeah, I think one of the companies merging in 2002 and 3 somewhere. So what should we do then? Should we merge with the same organization?
Well, then it's not, you can do as you want. I mean, you could, for example, do a graph without a merger and acquisition and a graph with merger and acquisition and try to figure out whether there is a big difference between the two. For instance, there's many ways to have a look at that. It's just, you know, one question.
Because I prefer that whenever there are mergers, I try to join them rather than show the difference between them.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not really talking about preference. We're just talking about making sure that you actually make a coursework which consider most of the aspects of the question. And for example, one of the aspects of the question could be, after the merger, what happens with the market share of the merging entity? How is it in relation to what happens over the previous years? That's something you might want to investigate. One of the main critiques that is made towards merger and acquisition is that basically the two don't sum up. Once the two companies have merged, there is a higher market share than before for the group, but still not as high as market share of A plus market share of B before. That might be something you want to have a look at. Okay, so that looks a bit more advanced. So here you just put cost in relation to profit for films, for individual films, is it? Yeah. Okay. And what does that tell you?
It tells me that there's no real relationship between cost and profits, and also done the regression on it, and it says that's only less than half of the revenues is explained by the costs of the movie. So there's I don't know, randomness.
Yeah, about what's interesting, you can still see though that there is a pack which is concentrated at 0. So
Yeah.
in a way, it still tells you that if you don't spend much, it's not very likely you're gonna get a lot from it. I mean, there are still cases where you don't spend much and you do get a lot of income. That's where it gets interesting, is that in the beginning you have a lot of movies which are packed on the left, but then as you increase it, so basically as costs are horizontal, right?
Yes.
Profits are vertical.
Yes.
So as you increase the cost, then basically anything can literally happen. You can have some quite profitable things. Like for example, there is a point here, which is so costly but profitable. And you have also something which are costly, non-costly, and profitable. So that's good. So you've run basically, you've done like ordinary square on that. And, has anybody tried to do that? I mean, did anyone try to use the OLS method to have a look at that?
What? Can you go back to the
Okay. Well, that's one of the things you can do actually now. It's one of the ways to have a look at this question. Okay. Well, thank you. Anyone else has advanced enough?